Have you ever stopped for a moment in the middle of your routine to seriously question why certain people seem capable of seeing possibilities, patterns, and opportunities that remain completely invisible to everyone else, and why these same individuals often make decisions that appear strange, irrational, or even absurd at first? Yet years later, the world looks back and realizes that those decisions were not only correct, but revolutionary. Most people grow up believing that intelligence is mainly about accumulating information, memorizing facts, collecting diplomas, and mastering established knowledge. But history repeatedly shows something far more intriguing and uncomfortable. The individuals responsible for the greatest breakthroughs were rarely those who simply accepted knowledge as it was given to them, but those who dared to question the structure behind that knowledge and challenge the invisible assumptions everyone else silently obeyed. From the moment a human being is born, an invisible process of programming slowly begins shaping the way that person interprets reality, because family, expectations, educational systems, cultural traditions, media narratives, and social pressure gradually construct a mental framework that defines what is considered possible, realistic, respectable, or even imaginable. And over time, this framework becomes so familiar that most people stop noticing it altogether. Little by little, a mental cage emerges, not built with iron bars or concrete walls, but constructed from beliefs, habits, social expectations, and inherited assumptions that quietly repeat messages such as "this is simply how the world works," "this is the only realistic path," or "that idea is impossible," until eventually these statements become so deeply internalized that questioning them begins to feel uncomfortable, risky, or even dangerous. However, throughout history, there have always been individuals who refused to accept this invisible cage as the final structure of reality. Individuals who sensed that behind the accepted rules of society there might exist deeper patterns, hidden opportunities, and alternative ways of thinking that most people never even attempt to explore. These individuals are often described as geniuses, visionaries, innovators, or pioneers. Yet what truly separates them from the majority is not some mystical gift of intelligence, but rather their willingness to step outside the mental system that quietly guides the thinking of everyone around them. In modern language, many people refer to this phenomenon as thinking outside the matrix, not as a science fiction metaphor about simulated worlds, but as a powerful psychological idea describing the moment when someone becomes aware of the invisible mental structures shaping perception, decision-making, and belief. To understand this idea more clearly, consider how many revolutionary discoveries in history began with someone questioning what everyone else assumed to be obvious truth, because when nearly the entire world believed that the sun revolved around the earth, one man dared to question the model itself. And when society believed that human flight was an impossible dream, a pair of bicycle mechanics quietly explored ideas that eventually changed transportation forever. At the beginning, these individuals were not celebrated as brilliant thinkers or admired as bold innovators, because society initially responded with skepticism, mockery, and sometimes hostility toward their ideas, since any new perspective that challenges established systems threatens the sense of certainty that people rely on for psychological comfort. This reaction reveals an important truth about human nature, which is that the mental matrix remains invisible to those living inside it, because just as fish cannot see the water surrounding them, most people cannot recognize the invisible assumptions guiding their thoughts, emotions, and reactions. People often believe that their opinions are entirely independent, logical, and original. Yet a closer look reveals that many of those ideas are borrowed from the environment around them, shaped by cultural narratives, reinforced by social media, influenced by dominant institutions, and protected by the natural human fear of being excluded from the group. Once someone begins noticing this pattern, an extraordinary shift in perception starts to occur because the world no longer appears as a random collection of events and opinions, but rather as a complex system of influences constantly guiding collective behavior. You begin to observe how trends suddenly shape millions of opinions, how emotional headlines drive public reactions, and how individuals passionately defend ideas they have never personally examined with critical thinking. This realization can be both unsettling and empowering, because it suggests that what most people call thinking is often simply reacting to signals generated by larger systems of influence. This is precisely why independent thinkers appear so rare and powerful, because genuine thinking requires the courage to pause, question, analyze, and sometimes disagree with the mental patterns accepted by the surrounding culture. However, thinking independently is not comfortable, because the human brain evolved primarily to ensure survival within a social group, which means that belonging, approval, and certainty often feel more psychologically rewarding than truth, exploration, or intellectual independence. When someone questions dominant beliefs or challenges popular narratives, they risk social rejection, criticism, and misunderstanding, which explains why so many people unconsciously avoid deep questioning and prefer to remain within familiar mental frameworks. Yet, if we examine the lives of many groundbreaking thinkers throughout history, a consistent pattern becomes visible, because before their ideas were recognized as brilliant or revolutionary, these individuals often experienced periods where they were misunderstood, ignored, or even ridiculed. This pattern highlights a powerful principle. Innovation frequently begins in isolation, because new ideas almost always appear strange before they become obvious. Understanding this principle allows us to examine the habits that enable certain individuals to think beyond conventional limits, and one of the most important of these habits is radical curiosity, the relentless desire to explore questions beyond the first available answer. While most people stop questioning once they receive a convenient explanation, highly creative thinkers continue digging deeper by asking why a system works the way it does, who benefits from certain rules, what hidden assumptions support those rules, and what might happen if the opposite perspective were considered. Another powerful thinking habit involves a technique known as mental inversion, where instead of focusing only on how to achieve success or progress, thinkers deliberately explore the opposite direction by asking how failure occurs, what destroys progress, or what mistakes repeatedly undermine success. This simple reversal often reveals hidden dangers and blind spots that remain invisible when attention is focused exclusively on positive outcomes. A third pattern common among creative thinkers is cross-disciplinary exploration, because instead of limiting their learning to a single field, they actively search for ideas across multiple disciplines, allowing insights from biology, physics, psychology, economics, and art to interact in unexpected ways. Many breakthroughs occur precisely at the intersection of different fields of knowledge, where unfamiliar combinations of ideas generate entirely new perspectives. Another essential habit involves intellectual independence, which requires emotional strength because it means evaluating ideas based on evidence rather than popularity, authority, or social pressure. Instead of asking whether an idea is widely accepted, independent thinkers ask whether the available evidence actually supports it. This approach does not automatically reject established knowledge, but it refuses to accept any claim without careful examination. However, thinking outside the matrix does not mean rejecting every system or opposing every convention, because rebellion by itself does not create intelligence or innovation. True independent thinking involves understanding systems deeply enough to recognize their strengths, weaknesses, and hidden assumptions, allowing individuals to refine or improve them rather than simply discard them. Every human-designed system contains limitations, blind spots, and structural weaknesses, and those who learn to observe systems carefully can often identify opportunities for improvement long before others notice the same patterns. This perspective resembles the thinking of master chess players, who do not merely focus on the next move, but instead analyze the entire structure of the board, understanding how certain positions shape future possibilities. When someone develops the ability to analyze systems rather than isolated events, life begins to appear less chaotic and more predictable, because patterns start revealing themselves beneath the surface. One of the most powerful tools used by innovative thinkers is the concept of mental models, which are simplified frameworks used to understand complex systems. Instead of relying on a single perspective, they collect multiple models from different disciplines and apply them like lenses when analyzing a problem. Each model highlights different aspects of reality, allowing thinkers to approach challenges from multiple angles rather than relying on a single interpretation. Unfortunately, many people prefer simple explanations and comfortable certainty, which is exactly what the mental matrix provides through clear narratives and familiar assumptions. Hale thinking, however, is often messy, complex, and uncertain, requiring patience and intellectual humility. Those who develop this patience gain a remarkable advantage because while others argue about surface-level details, they focus on underlying structures. Another overlooked factor in deep thinking is solitude, because complex reflection often requires silence and uninterrupted attention. Modern technology constantly fragments attention through notifications, headlines, entertainment, and social media, leaving little mental space for deep analysis. Yet many important insights appear during quiet moments when the mind finally has time to connect ideas that previously seemed unrelated. Protecting attention therefore becomes essential for independent thinking, because attention is the raw material from which all ideas are formed. Another powerful method used by innovators is first principles thinking, which involves breaking problems down into their most fundamental truths and rebuilding solutions from the ground up. Instead of assuming that traditional methods must be followed simply because they exist, first principles thinkers ask what basic facts must actually be true and then design solutions accordingly. Although this approach often challenges established norms and can create friction with existing systems, it has repeatedly produced revolutionary innovations throughout history. This brings us to an important realization. The greatest obstacle to independent thinking is rarely intelligence, but rather courage. Courage to question inherited assumptions, courage to tolerate uncertainty, and courage to continue exploring ideas even when others doubt them. Once someone develops this mindset, they begin noticing inefficiencies, outdated rules, and hidden incentives shaping behavior across many systems. These insights create powerful opportunities for creativity, entrepreneurship, and innovation. While most individuals follow established scripts, independent thinkers gradually learn how to rewrite them. The true secret behind genius thinking therefore lies not in extraordinary intellectual ability, but in the willingness to examine reality from perspectives that others overlook. And perhaps the most exciting aspect of this realization is that the ability to think independently can be developed through deliberate practice. Every time someone questions assumptions, explores unfamiliar disciplines, analyzes systems, or protects their attention from constant distraction, they strengthen the mental muscles required for independent thought. Over time, these habits expand perception, allowing individuals to recognize patterns across economics, culture, technology, and human behavior. At that point, the invisible mental matrix begins to reveal itself, and the individual no longer experiences life merely as a passive participant reacting to events. Instead, they become an observer capable of understanding the deeper structures guiding those events. The final question, therefore, becomes deeply personal. Are you willing to question the assumptions shaping your thinking? Are you willing to explore ideas beyond the boundaries of conventional belief? Because those who accept this challenge often discover a surprising truth. The greatest thinkers in history were not fundamentally different from everyone else. They simply refused to allow the system to do their thinking for them. And once someone learns to do the same, the world begins to look very different indeed.